vulnerabilities. Okay, sorry, recording just started. So this session is designed to help care providers with varying technical abilities and knowledge of cybersecurity to understand what the dark web is and hidden dangers care providers are exposed to, along with how and where we may all be exposed to breaches, and also how your information ends up on the dark web in the first place, and how that can then lead to cyber attacks. So those who participate today will hopefully join us for the third event, and those who have registered for this event can also register to be one of 50 organisations who can apply for a complimentary dark web search for their organisation. And I'll ask one of my colleagues to drop a link into the chat so you can register for your dark web search. If one of my colleagues could drop that in, that would be very much appreciated. We'll just let the chat settle down a bit before they do that. The dark web search is an invaluable report highlighting where you and your data may be compromised and what action you need to take to mitigate those findings. We also hope those who join today will register, if not already, for the third and final event in the series of the cybersecurity webinars with CCOE and Digital Care Hub, which will look at resilience, recovery and incident response, and what key staff really need to know and what action they should consider to build long-term cyber resilience. I'll also ask colleagues to drop a link into the chat shortly. We're linking you to our first webinar in the series so that you can catch up, and also a link to the third webinar so you can register if you haven't done so already. So please look out in the chat for those 3 links. Today's format will consist of myself covering the housekeeping as I'm doing now, after which I shall introduce Curtis from CCOE, who will introduce himself and talk you through everything for about 20 minutes. He'll then be followed by Sam from the Digital Care Hub, our ethical hacker, who again will introduce himself and talk for about another 20 minutes, after which I will moderate a short 15-minute Q&A session based on what we've heard. Following that session, we then have 30 minutes at the end, which is optional for those of you who wish to stay to continue to discuss any issues concerned or ask our panel any questions directly about cybersecurity and what you've heard today, or just cybersecurity generally. There are no daft questions, but if you don't want to ask something and you don't wish to do so, if you do want to ask something and you don't wish to do so directly to our panel, I will very shortly pop my email address into the chat so you can send me an email privately and I will ask that for you anonymously on your behalf. So when Curtis and Sam are talking, you are free to use the Q&A function. You should be able to find that in one of your menu options to raise any questions privately during the presentation, and we'll put those to a panel during the Q&A session. I will ask that you keep yourselves on mute during the session while our presenters are speaking. But after Curtis and Sam have finished, as I said, I will facilitate a Q&A session and raise any questions that have come up in the chat via email or directly to me via email, sorry, in the Q&A. You're also free to raise your hand at that point and ask a question directly. As I said, I'll drop my email address into the chat shortly. We are recording the session, and our intention is, as always, to note any unanswered questions and to send a copy of the recording, the slides that you'll see today, and any other information after our presenters have finished today. Sometime later on this week, you'll also get contact details for our presenters should you wish to reach out to them directly. So without further ado, please let me hand over to Curtis to start things off for us today. Curtis.
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. So I do have a habit of speaking very quickly. It's my natural default speed, so I will try to slow down, but feel free to shout at me in the chat if I'm going too quickly. So I'm Curtis Toy. I'm the Chief Exec and the lead virtual CISO, which is Chief Information Security Officer for the Cyber Centre of Excellence for the UK. And I'm going to be towing through some of the kind of touch points and a lead through of the dark web and exactly what it's kind of about before I hand over to Sam from Digital Care Hub to then go on a bit of a deeper dive into it. So I'm going to jump in and talk about the deep, the dark, and the hidden dangers needed going through onto the dark web. So that's what the main topic for today is. So what is the dark web? How does data, including leaked login credentials, then make its way onto the dark web? And how do we continuously monitor breaches and how do we remediate them? So what risks do the dark web pose to the care organisations, so all of your lovely selves? So as Richard said, there are no daft questions, so please feel free to ask anything to us, and Sam and I will do our best to answer anything. And of course, feel free to email afterwards and we can cover anything else that we need. My slides are showing up on my right screen, so that's why I'm looking to the right, but I'll come back to this once we're done for the Q&A. I've got a quick test for everybody. So as we're going into the dark web, it's a key thing to highlight that one of the methods that's being used for tricking people, and one of the parts that's going to be relatable to all of you, I'm sure, is an increase in phishing that we've seen massively. So the parts of with AI increasing and generative AI becoming more useful across the board, people are now using generative AI to help create phishing emails and phishing links that trick people. One of the ways now to be able to identify AI is by very, very carefully looking at letters, but that's becoming increasingly difficult for human eyes. So I've got on the screen an example of apple.com and apple.com and google.com and google.com. And believe it or not, these are completely different. So if anyone is able, with the eyes of an eagle, to be able to spot, and Sam, I'm going to ask you not to shout out what the answer is, because I know you already know. So if you can tell me what you think the difference might be between apple.com and apple.com, or google.com and google.com, then please carry on. Whilst you're looking, I'm just going to give a run through of what this means. So previously, Sam and I and lots of other organizations like the NCSC and other organizations helping with cybersecurity would tell people, look for spelling mistakes and look for poor English and grammatical errors and tones of urgency. Now with generative AI, there aren't really many grammatical errors. There aren't really many spelling mistakes. There is still the tone of urgency. So that is one that you can keep an eye out for in phishing, to make sure that you can keep an eye out for it. Other than that, it's becoming increasingly difficult. So you do need more technical tools to be able to support, as well as training in other areas. Now, the reason I bring this up and it's related to the dark web is because there's been an increase in phishing for everybody across the board, where lots of emails are going out. But using information from the dark web, attackers can now tailor information specifically related to you. So either using breach credentials or using email addresses that they find, so then it comes in more closely related to you. I got one the other day related to my dog, telling me that the microchip on her collar had ran out. And they've obviously managed to get the database from the vet that I use, and being able to then try and scare me. So I phoned the vet and just confirmed I don't have an expiry date on the microchip, right? And I don't. But the link in the email from this company purporting to be an issue were just trying to get me to click on the link effectively, and there was a ransomware attack within it. So it's just a key thing is, if you hear any urgency, be suspicious. Any email, use zero trust is what we spoke about in the last session. So now treat every email as suspicious unless you can then work out that it's trusted. And that obviously depends. If there's a link or an attachment, be suspicious. If it's somebody just telling you, I'll meet you down at the cafe in 5 minutes for a coffee, that one's okay. But if it's asking you to click on something, that's the issue. A few people put in, so people have had a look. So I'll put you out of your misery. This is the difference here. So the L here in Apple is an actual L, and this is actually a coding pipeline. So it's not a letter at all. It just looks like a lowercase L when it's not in bold. So this isn't a letter at all. And this is actually, so I've forgotten the name of it now. It's two Latin capital O's. So this is now capital letters. So they are O's, but they are not the correct O. So these ones are the trick. So if anybody did notice that, then very well done. You have the eyes of a hawk, but it is something that's commonly coming in. An example that I had fairly recently was this one from Microsoft telling me to reset my password. I am the IT person for my company, so it was unlikely to be coming from me, but it was actually RN Microsoft and not an M. So the only difference there is just that tiny gap between the R and the N, which was in the area. So just some proof of it in action. So just to tell you exactly the type of thing that comes in from it. And a quick note on phishing as well, because I think it's important just so we keep everybody up to date. Phishing links are now coming in and attachments through calendar invites. So now it's not just your emails that they're coming into, but also calendar invites. This is a calendar invite that went into my calendar automatically because it didn't require me to respond. They changed it. The RSVP came up on it, but it didn't have to respond, so it appeared in my calendar. And the key part here is telling me that there was a file with a reference. I don't know this person, and I know that that's not the correct address, but this is the attack down here, the attachment in here. So obviously I didn't open it, I deleted it, but I just wanted to let you know that this was an attack coming in. So now if there's a calendar invite suddenly appearing in your calendar, please be aware that if there's an attachment or a link in it, do not click on it unless you know it is from a trusted source. And on that very cheery note, I'm going to go through some other sophisticated types of examples that come through, and they do link to the dark web. It's a method that they get information and also use information on the dark web to you. So device code, when I just went through with Teams invites. Spear phishing, so using meeting invites to try and get you to click on something to get remote access onto your machine. Images, just remember that images can also contain links, so please don't click on an image if you think there might be a hyperlink behind it, because it might take you to something that's got a phishing site behind it. AI-powered personalization I've covered, just making it more easy to target and trick you using what we call social engineering, basically just trying to use things like urgency or your dog's microchip is expiring to trick you into clicking onto something. And deepfake impersonation with AI coming in, so deepfakes of CEOs and bosses, as we've seen in the media, are now happening more often. Consent phishing from applications asking for access. So if something pops up on your screen saying, can you give access to this? Just make sure it is from your company. And then if your info is up to date. So also be aware that you must trust the source of the information before you click on unsubscribe from something, because now there are sometimes phishing links in unsubscribe. So just a note on some of the phishing things to be up to date, to give you all a bit of an update on. Now, here's the difference between the dark web and why you should know it. So I'm just going to go through a bit of an analogy, and I use the supermarket analogy because it's easy for everyone to be able to relate to. So the surface web is effectively like walking into a supermarket and you're going in, everything is organized by aisle. You would expect to find an apple in the fruit section. You would expect to find a frozen pizza in the freezers. You know where it's going to be because it's categorized on your behalf when you go in. This is the same as us using the normal web. We go in, we look around and we kind of go to it. So when you're going to Google and you typing for fun images of poodles, whatever presentation you're making on dog breeds, then you can go in and you know exactly where you're searching. That's effectively what's coming in. Now the deep web is effectively restricted areas like your banking, your health record, anything that you are logging into and you have to prove who you are to be able to get access. That's the equivalent in a supermarket of like a staff room or a staff only area like stock rooms and offices. So going through the back door, we know that technically you could walk through the door at the back of the supermarket and get into the room, but you probably need a pass key now, or you're going in, or you know that that area is not for you, so you keep out. So it's kind of that grey area of technically you can access it, but you don't need to, because everything you need is on the surface web in the main part of the shop front. And if you did go into the staff room, hopefully somebody says this isn't for you and tells you to go back out. Now the dark web is more like a delivery van that takes goods and disappears into the night. So this is like a van appearing at the back of a supermarket, picking up boxes and stock from it and then taking it in. Now, in some areas, it might be that you have a rough idea because there's been a breach notification, or you know that something is gone, so you're aware of it because you've done a stock take and you know it's not there. In most cases, though, you don't know what's been taken and you don't know the exact numbers, and the stock take might have been done at the supermarket in the shop front on the surface web, but it wasn't done in the stock room. So you don't exactly know what's gone into the van. And most importantly, you don't know who's taken it. And this is the most difficult part, and the part that we then need to cover, and Sam and I will be going through today, is it's that difficulty of trying to understand what that data is doing with it. So you don't know who's taking it and you don't know what they're doing with it. And that's what makes it finding it really tricky. Now, a key part from discussions I've had with others is realizing that actually the surface web, the deep web, and the dark web are all the same web. They're just different layers of access to it. So surface web is publicly available, like Google and websites and YouTube and that kind of thing. Deep web, you need to usually have a password or a key of access in some manner to be able to get there. It's not illegal at all. It's just private. That's all. It's internet banking and private forums and things like your medical records and health areas that you log into. Then the dark web is hard to track or trace, impossible to determine everything that's in that van I spoke about, and it's quite often illegal. So it's things like Tor, Anonymous, and the Silk Road, but Sam will touch on those parts afterwards. So the key thing to realize is it is one internet that we use. It's just that these are all different areas of the same area, of the same web. So it's just different layers that we're going through. So why do we need to know this? We need to understand that it's very, very easy for information to move from one layer to another. In that same way, if you had a box of carrots in a supermarket, you could pass it to somebody to take to the staff room, and the staff person could put it outside their back door, and it goes into the van. It is not really much more complicated than that. It's just a case of where the layers are and what they can do with that. It's not very much they can do with a box of carrots, but it depends on how innovative and determined they're going to be from it. This means that anything we put onto the web ourselves, we need to be selective of, because you don't know what's taking that information and then putting it to the back. So a good example of this is putting information onto social media, particularly related to information. So for me, for instance, talking about my dog, people might then find out my dog's name and then use that against me, which is exactly the type of thing that's happened with that email I was talking about earlier, saying about the microchip. So it's just making it clear that information can be used. It's also why lots of forms and quizzes that you see on social media say, oh, tell me your mother's maiden name and tell me other aspects. So it's because they're trying to find this information. This then all builds up a kind of picture of a person and can end up being moved to the dark web and other areas where it's then discussed. So the information you put onto the web is not easily deleted. It's just a matter of whether you still have access to it. So if you think about deleting something on your computer, for starters, you delete it from your desktop and it ends up in your recycle bin. It will live in your recycle bin until you then either have an automatic setting that deletes the recycle bin, so purges it, or you go into the recycle bin and delete it. It's similar to stuff on the website. When you're posting something, it's usually going to that company server, like Facebook servers or Meta's or whatever, and then sitting there for a while until it's then gone. So the difficulty is you have no idea where that's being held and whether it has been properly deleted or not. So just being aware of it. Info that's then on the dark web can be used against us, and Sam will pick up on that thread more. I'm just talking about going into the dark web, and then Sam's going to take us back out of it. So in the shadows, what's already out is the kind of information that's on the dark web and is being used against us. So that's kind of data breaches, the kind of thing that you see happening fairly frequently, including in the big attack against the supermarkets like Marks & Spencer's and the Co-op. The Co-op in particular, everybody that was signed up to their Co-op membership, their data was breached and was available, so is now available on the dark web. Doxing, which I'll come back to later, it's related to personal data. Domain monitoring, so looking at your domains for your companies and checking to see whether there are any vulnerabilities and weaknesses in them. And supply chain, so that's looking at suppliers, particularly big suppliers, so think like the big Capita breach for public sector for councils. It's that kind of thing of looking at, well, if we can't get to the specific target, who can we use that is likely to serve them, and going through that kind of avenue. Things trying to come from the dark web into our systems are things like looking for vulnerabilities so that they can get a crack into the system and find a way in. And they might come from outdated software or something that hasn't been patched or updated, certificates that have expired. So when you're going onto a website, there are certificates in the background that effectively make sure that things are valid, a domain and a network name. So the key point here is just that there's no one way in. There are methods that they can go in from different areas, which means we must have defense in depth to make sure that they can look at it from any angle and they still aren't able to get to the main point that they're able to get to want to get to. Just a quick example of some leaks. So this is using data that we've collected in my organization. So there were 334 leaks in 2025 and in the US states, and in the UK, 73 leaks. Now, this doesn't mean it's 73 pieces of data. This is 73 enormous leaks. These are very large leaks of gigabytes of data. So this is just in 2025 over the course of really a few months with the data that I looked at. So it's a global problem, not just a UK problem, but we are a significantly targeted area. Some threat actors targeting the UK and specifically the care sector directly are these ones up here. Don't worry, you don't need to know the names. You can ignore everything that's said here. I'm just flagging up information in the background that we use to highlight. So the key parts here are to look at where they are likely coming from. So this one here and this one, we don't know where it's from. This one, we're entirely unknown. We don't know where it's coming from. This one, we think it's likely from Palestine, or it looks like it's using Palestine as an agent to be able to show where it's from. India, China, Iran, Russia, and a lot from Russia, as you would expect, are all areas that we're seeing these large attacks from. The part that is useful to know is if you ignore all of this area and look at the kind of targeting here, this is the one that we would then focus more on. And their specializations, their method in, and what they look at most to be able to get to an organization is social engineering, which is effectively using your data against you to trick you into giving them the information that they need, regardless of what that data is. Other areas are hacking, as you would expect, ransomware, espionage, and IP theft, which is a big one. So, but for the care sector, I would say one of the biggest targets and the biggest issues is social engineering. So it's using you and your staff against you to see what's going through. Between the Cyber Centre of Excellence and Care England, we did an exercise early last year where we searched through individual parts of the dark web, and we found just under 15,000 email addresses for 20 of the top 50 organisations in the care sector. That's about 18% of the total market in the UK for the care sector. Of those nearly 15,000 emails, 6,380 were unique, so the rest have been repeatedly put up. 1,452 had a plain text password, so just open password that was easy to read. And 253 of them had a hashed password that then meant that Sam and I would have some work trying to break the password. So plain text passwords that we've found, I can tell you this now, people were still using passwords like password123 and various other things. We covered a lot of that in the first session, so I'm not going to repeat too much, but it's just highlighting that when we say, change your password and make sure it's not leaked, we really do mean it. This being on the dark web means that we can then alert people to say, this information is being used, so don't use this password anymore. And then you have to go through the wonderfully laborious exercise of remembering where you've used that password and changing it, which is also why we say make sure you use a unique password for every individual login. So that's a quick stock tour about kind of going into the dark web and the difference between the surface and then going down through the layers into dark web. And I'm now going to hand over to Sam, who's going to take us further into detail in the dark web before we then come back to Richard and go through some questions.
Thank you very much. For those who don't know me, I'm Sam, also known as Cyber Sam. I'm the technical cyber lead for Digital Care Hub and also an ethical hacker. So if you can just grab your flaming torches, hold tightly to the rope, I'm going to take you down into the darknet and show you from a hacker's perspective what it is, why it's used, and things like that. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So why are we telling you in the care service about the dark web? Now, I know Curtis briefly mentioned it, but one of the reasons is that obviously dark web is where criminal gangs, groups, all sorts of things can share their own knowledge and experience. It's where stolen data, email addresses, malware, software weaknesses such as 0 days are circulated and traded. Passwords, as Curtis mentioned, and login details can be found, shared, and traded. What works for one particular attack can be shared and reused by others. And the big thing why we're talking to you about it is that care data holds significant value due to its highly specific personal information. Generally speaking, people are more willing to pay a premium to make sure that they get their personal data back or to stop it from going out there. And that's why it's a dangerous thing, because I haven't got any proof of this, but I did see something where your credit card number is worth about 10 times less than your medical information because the amount you're going to give back. So I'm going to do a quick bit of myth busting with you now because we get a lot of questions on the dark web. I keep saying darknet, my apologies, on the dark web. So a little bit of myth busting for you now. Accessing the dark web is illegal. It's not. Like a lot of things in life, visiting the dark web isn't illegal itself. It's only illegal if you actually do something illegal, or obviously if you pay for illegal goods or services. Another big one, only technical people and criminals use the dark web. No, it's a piece of software that you install and you're on, basically. But many other people use dark web for legitimate reasons, such as journalists, students, cyber professionals, and spooks. Although spooks, grey area of what's okay and what's not, depending where you're looking from. Using the dark web is the only way to stay anonymous. No, there's loads of ways to protect your privacy online. You don't have to use Tor or anything like that. Every online crime happens on the dark web. Nope, many crimes happen on the surface web. As Curtis said earlier, the surface web is just the normal internet that we use every day, such as Google and stuff like that. Phishing sites are more often on the surface web. Basically, fake logins of your bank and stuff are usually hosted on the normal internet, not hidden away on the darknet. Cryptocurrencies are used for crime only. That's not technically true, although it's getting harder to defend it, I think. Curtis might disagree with me. But although it is used for anonymity, cryptocurrencies have many other uses to be able to transfer assets instantly between people without a middle person. That's the idea. Dark web is the only place to see banned media, such as books. Again, not true. You can find banned media all over the surface web. You can Google Internet Archives, the Wayback When machine. There's all sorts of ways to find things. VPNs, if something's blocked in your country, you can view it somewhere else. And it's impossible to be tracked on the darknet. If it was impossible to be tracked on the darknet, I probably wouldn't have a job because I spent a lot of my time helping people track down people on the darknet. It is a great way to stay anonymous online and for privacy reasons, and I do recommend it if you happen to be a journalist or stuck in a country that has very limiting access. But it has many vulnerabilities and it is traceable through several techniques, which I won't talk to you at the moment. You don't need to know that. If you're interested, let me know, and I will happily nerd out about how you can trace people on the darknet. But that's not for today. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Myth busting the myth. So I hear these all the time, and I see them on YouTube. I see adverts about it. Disturbing dark web horror stories. 3 scariest dark web stories. I've got these from YouTube. These pictures. No idea what Groot is doing in there. Apparently, Groot's particularly frightening, but there we go. But the myth is, if you browse deep enough, you will find murder for hire, torture videos, and horrific services. And the truth is, these are almost entirely urban legends or made up for sensationalized content. While people do love things like this, it's just like in real life. There are terrible things on the darknet, of course there is, exactly as there is in real life as well. But most of these are absolutely fake. I say, while people love a tale of dark web killers and scammers, dark web killers, what happens often is that scammers will just advertise hitman services to get money out of people, and there's no real hitman there. I say, there's almost no legitimate murder for hire. Every time law enforcement has investigated something like this, it's turned out to be a scam or just an undercover operation from another country. Yes, we'll be sharing the slides. I know I said I wouldn't answer chat, but I'll say that we will be sharing all these slides. I realize a couple of my slides have a lot of wording on. That's why I want to share these slides, because there's a lot to go through. Apologies. Exactly the same. Snuff films, anything like that. When you hear these things, it's very unlikely to be true. Scammers are particularly bad at using these stories to pull people in to try and sell them something that's not real. And then they'll double hit them by saying, not only have I got the money from you for the first time, but I will tell people that you asked for this if you don't give me more money. So that's the kind of scams that happen. So don't lose any sleep on these kind of horror stories. Focus on the genuine risks such as phishing, malware, scams, and data breaches. I say here, the dark web is not quite as dark as it sounds. There's a lot of horror stories, a lot of trolls, and that's what I want to say. It's just like, try and get rid of that urban myth, and it's just another place on the internet. It's a bit like 4chan, but with less technical people. So this is one of the slides I was telling about. This will be shared with you. I just want to fly through this because a lot of people ask me if the dark web is full of these criminals, why does it exist? Where did it come from, and why is it done? So it came from basically three places. During the 90s, the US Naval Research began working on onion routing technology to protect government communications so that they could talk to each other without it being intercepted. 2000, the release of Freenet, which is a thesis project of Ian Clark, where he set out to create this is a ridiculous title, but these are students for you, distribute a decentralized information storage and retrieval system. And on top of that, you've got the Tor project, which happened in around December 2006. Those three together kind of give what the dark web is at the moment. Now, how does it work? As I say, it was originally used by the United States Department of Defense to communicate anonymously as much as possible with each other. It uses a technology called onion routing, which just protects users from surveillance and tracking through random paths of encrypted services. I'm looking over here because that's where my slides are, so apologies that I keep looking over there. And illegal. Given its anonymous nature, obviously the darknet is sometimes used for illicit purposes. These include the buying and selling of illegal drugs, weapons, passwords, stolen identities, as well as the trading of illegal pornography and other harmful materials. Because it's an anonymous dark place, criminals feel more comfortable sharing and doing things there. Anonymous dark web forums have essentially become the modern gathering places for cyber criminals, much like pubs once were for other criminals. There's certain pubs that you'll know about, dodgy pubs, as I remember calling them, where you could find your DVDs and stuff that you wanted. Similar to that. The legitimate persons, I don't think it's on here, but legitimate persons, things like journalists and stuff like that. So it can be used legitimately. It's journalists, political activists, stuff like that, students. So we go to the next slide. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually take you to the places on the darknet that most likely myself, such as a white hat hacker, that's an ethical hacker, and the criminals go, where they go, what they do, and why they do it. And I'm going to take you through some of these places. I'm not going to show you where they are, unless you can work it out from my images, but I will talk about them. So, as Curtis mentioned, leak sites is one of the big ones. Leak sites are typically run by established criminal groups and are used to showcase recent breaches. There's data that they've stolen from your network. They often publish small samples of stolen data as proof of access, both to pressure the affected organization and also to demonstrate credibility to others. A bit like advertising, they are selling their wares to other criminal groups, saying, well, we managed to get into the co-op, here's the stuff that we've got. And they also prove to the co-op that we have got into your stuff. because I could tell any of you that I've breached your private internet browsing. I know the dodgy sites you've been visiting. I can say things like that. It's not true, but if I had proof of that, that would be more difficult for you to deny. So that's why they do that. As I say, in some cases, this can include personally identified information if the group wants to increase leverage. Now, what I mean by that is that they quite often have a lot more data than they will publish, but they will only publish little bits of it as proof. But they'll quite often publish personally identifiable data, especially of like decision makers such as CEOs and things like that, to really try and put the pressure up to pay in a ransom type way. I say ransomware negotiators and the cyber incident responders, we can usually, well, not that I'm an incident response person, but we usually assess whether leaked data is genuine or assembled from publicly available sources before taking it at face value. One of the big things I did back in my banking days, part automated and part analyst, we looked for Visa credit card numbers and MasterCard credit card numbers. And from that, we could start to backtrace where that came from, whether it came from a direct steal from when they were being created, or whether it was a batch from a particular merchant when we realized that, and then you can trace from a machine and stuff like that. So that kind of leak happens all the time. That's why we, on the ethical side, on the cybersecurity side, also use a darknet to keep an eye on stuff like that. So if we go to another dark web place, databases and data. Sometimes stolen database data, or occasionally entire databases, is uploaded, such as rota, scheduling, payroll and finance, HR and staff records, care management platforms, or CRMs. Hackers and criminal groups can do this for various reasons. Now, one reason, a bit like we all do, you've all done your DSPT, I understand it. You know you've got to back up your data in case of ransomware. A hacker has to back up their data in case they get the law enforcement breaking their door down and stealing their computers. So one of the reasons they use the darknet is dark web is it's harder for law enforcement to take that information down. So they'll go and put it up there for later use, and then they can access it. Another is to openly distribute stolen database so others can attempt to compile an encrypted database, because sometimes a database looks like nonsense until you've unencrypted it, or decrypt hash passwords, which I know Curtis mentioned briefly, in a collaborative effort. So it's a bit like if you steal a safe but you don't know how to open it, you bring it to a designated location and allow loads of people to have a go at breaking into the safe, and therefore open sourcing your criminality. Quite nice if you think about it. Okay, if we go into the next slide, I should have probably changed this. Something as a service, or AS, as I'm now going to refer it to as. These things are all over the darknet. It's malware as a service or ransomware as a service are the main ones. They're the dark twins to software as a service business model. If you know software as a service business model, your cloud services, stuff like that, these are just the illegal versions of that. These offerings allow affiliates, those are just people who want to break the law, with limited technical skill to deploy established tools without developing their own malware. So you don't have to be a coder, you don't have to be a hacker, you don't have to go through the years and years Curtis and I did. You could just get somebody else to do that and give them a cut of the profits. Now, ransomware as a service kit may include 24/7 support. It certainly has customer support. Bundled offers, you can get 50% off in like January because of Christmas overspends. User reviews, forums, and other features. They run these like a business, like anything else. They've got customer service, they've got training, they've sometimes got call centers, and the call centers don't always know what they're doing. The model lowers the technical barrier to entry and allows attacks to scale more easily. Because you don't need the technical skill to build the stuff yourself, you can just use somebody else's. And quite often what they'll do is, I've got this target that I want to get, who I used to work for, so I'm going to use your software to do it for. You can get 40% of the cut, that kind of thing. The other big thing, dark web forums. These are two of the big ones that I could think of. Anonymous dark web forums are informal gathering places for cyber criminal communities and people who are just curious, and students as well. But on this sake, obviously, we're looking at the criminal side. Participants discuss past activity, what they've done. They share tactics, techniques, and procedures. They exchange ideas, and they sometimes encourage escalation. The thing that always makes me worry when I see in the forum is, Wouldn't it be funny if, because usually after that something happens, that's where a breach occurs, or somebody tries something stupid, or a DDoS attack happens. That's a distributed denial of service. Discussions can include security bypass methods, so showing off to each other. It's like, oh, I've just realized that on Facebook, when they ask for your CV to be uploaded, you can put some malware in there. That's an old one that they've patched, by the way, but that's the kind of thing that happens. Vulnerability finds and even 0 days. 0 days is just a vulnerability in a piece of software that the software provider vendor hasn't found yet. That's all that 0 day means, because they've had 0 days to prepare for it. That's why it's called that. They also can offer training and guidance, and sometimes offered to less experienced participants, helping the dark knowledge spread quickly. Okay, if we have a look at something else, another room in the darkness, jailbroken AI, quite a big thing at the moment. Jailbroken AI just refers to AI systems that have been modified so it bypasses the built-in safety and ethical controls. No comment on Grok, but you know what I mean. This allows jailbroken AI to generate content or guidance that would normally be restricted, such as malicious code, scam scripts, or exploitative deepfake media. As Curtis mentioned earlier, pretending to be your CEO, things like that. Could be photo, could be video, could be audio. Scammers use generative AI, such as Spam GPT. As I say, they do run these like businesses to rapidly produce phishing messages, fake profiles, and persuasive content at scale. Again, these tools lower the effort required to deceive people and amplify existing social engineering techniques rather than replacing them. You will still get the other social engineering techniques as well, but this can be done at scale and used like very quickly. So, rounding off in plain English, as I've rattled through that, but I promise these are going to be shared and we will answer some questions. How does data end up on the darknet? Very simply, criminals or hackers will upload it after gaining access. That can be either they've breached your database or they've talked somebody into giving them the keys, which is your social engineering. Phishing emails is a massive thing that still happens. Vishing, voice phishing, call scams, is massively on the rise at the moment. As I say, this can include personal data, usernames, email addresses, passwords, or even full databases. Imagine if your entire CRM went on the darknet and could be used against you. What risk, obviously, does this pose to care organizations in particular? Care data is highly personal, sensitive, and potentially lucrative if in the wrong hands, or the right hands, depending which side you're looking at. Busy people-centered environments like yours leave less room for constant cyber focus. You've got so much going on as it is. With the amount that you have to do, cyber focus is very easy to take your eyes off. Nobody's fault. It's just that you've got so many competing priorities because you want to look after people, and rightly so. These things can slip into the background a little bit. As I say before, shared tools, AI, and the stuff that I've known has lowered the entry level to cyber criminality. You used to have to have coding knowledge. You used to have the ability to reverse engineer software and stuff. That's no longer the case, and it allows people with very limited technical skill to cause real harm on organizations. I say the attack surface itself didn't need to increase. There's just more people with the ability to attack it and more sophisticated tools to be able to do that. And then just very quickly, defense, just to cover off what Curtis was saying there. Defense in layers, threat intelligence, what's out there, what's coming. Horizon scanning, what have other people experienced, what can you expect to come down the road? And ask for help. There is a lot going on now, whether that's coming to Curtis, myself, Richard, whether it's going and looking at a framework that you can go through step by step, whether it's going on training courses for yourself and upskilling or watching YouTube videos. Always feel free to ask for help. That's why we're here. I say Curtis, myself, we absolutely nerd out about this stuff. If you ever got any questions, that's why we're here for. I realize I rattled through that fairly quickly, but if there are any questions, Richard?
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Curtis and Sam. I mean, that's incredibly worrying, well, worryingly helpful, I would say, from the examples of the sort of the Apple and Google misspelling points, which are kind of incredibly convincing, kind of proving that we have to be really, really vigilant. And, you know, concerning like what calendar invites can go straight into your diaries, and that when you go from busy meeting to meeting, it's very easy just to kind of click on these things. But it's really helpful to understand kind of like the surface, the deep and the dark web, because I always thought the deep web was something to worry about, but that kind of really, really helpfully brought to life. It's concerning just really how much data can be just out there ready to be used against us. And again, thank you, Sam, for just sharing kind of details and bringing to life some of those like leak sites and the databases and the ransomware and malware and jailbroken AI, which can really be incredibly convincing. AI is so convincing; it's scary. It kind of really helps to bring it to life and to understand that these organisations are running it like businesses, so they can commit crime at scale. That's really deeply disturbing. That it is so normal to run those businesses on the dark web. So I think I'd encourage providers to register those dark web scans to really see what of their information is available on the dark web. And those links I know we put in the chat, we'll definitely send those out with the slides of the recording. The worrying point, and Curtis has mentioned this to me many times, is that health data is more valuable than credit card data. You draw on it as well, Sam. That's really worrying because we hold a lot of data for very, very vulnerable people. So again, thank you for the comments so far in the chat. I've got some questions. I'll keep an eye on some of those that are coming. Quick question to Curtis, just to clarify a couple of points. You used some terms. One of them was hashed passwords. The other one, I think, was doxing, and another one was Tor. Would you just cover what those three terms mean, just to bring them to life briefly, because we've got lots of questions that have come in.
Yeah, no problem. So hashed passwords is basically when you create your password. So for an example, we'll say Mickey1 exclamation mark is the password that you've put in. When you store that into a system, depending on the system you're using, they might add what we call salt, which is basically adding a kind of code or something at the end. So it ends up becoming Mickey exclamation mark 1. And then they might have coffee cup at the end of it, or it's usually gobbledygook, but it might be something they add in. There may be something that they do to it so that each new password that goes in is slightly different. So it ends up being teapot or salt and pepper. I've no idea where these terms are coming from. It's just the first thing on my head. Maybe I'm hungry. It's near lunchtime. So it's effectively just something that gets added onto the end of it. So that's quite often we call it adding salt to a password. So you put in the password and the salt gets added to it, so that then it becomes longer and more complicated. Hashing is effectively then taking that password, whether there is salt added or not, and then basically putting it through a one-way encryption. So it ends up being a long string of nonsense characters. So it just looks like complete gobbledygook, like somebody just rolled over a keyboard a few times into it. So that then that is actually the part that's stored. Then when you log on the next time, you put in Mickey exclamation mark 1 and you do it and you push submit. In the back end, the software then looks for that, converts it in the same way algorithm, and then looks to see whether it matches what it's got stored on the database, and that's how it's then doing the password match. So when it's a hash password, it means it's gone through some kind of encryption. Now the difficulty is encryption levels change all the time. So the levels that we're using at the moment might be able to be decrypted, which is the other way, going from what the end gobbledygook ends up coming back to Mickey 1 exclamation mark. And that then becomes a matter of basically a race against time. So tools that Sam and I can use effectively look to see whether the hash has already been broken elsewhere. So if somebody has already got Mickey exclamation mark 1 and it's already been breached, and we know what that looks like with this encryption and this encryption and this encryption, then we can put in what the gobbledygook is and say, check it on the different types of encryption and put it back. So then we know the password is Mickey1, and then we can get into the account. So effectively hashing just means going through some kind of encryption to turn it into nonsense code effectively. So that's the kind of main thing.
Salt your hashes, people. Sorry, that's Cyber Sam and Chef Sam recommended. Salt your hashes.
Yeah, so adding in that salt, that additional part, whether it's coffee cup or teacup, just makes it more difficult to find that out separately. So because it just makes it unique. So even if Mickey has been breached, it doesn't mean that coffee cup has. So it just makes it a bit easier. Doxing simply means pulling out personal information on a person. So it's effectively, when we say doxing, it means that we're maybe using a tool to go and dox through LinkedIn. And basically it just means it's pulling personal information from LinkedIn and then building like an Excel database or table, putting together personal information that's then used for things like social engineering attacks, which is just targeting an individual person to say, hi, Sam, you're Cyber Sam, right? I saw you on the webinar last week. And effectively that might just come from something that's been posted about LinkedIn, that they've got Sam's mobile number from two separate sources, and then they're using that information to say from the webinar to make it look like they're then a trusted source. So that's what we mean from that part. And Tor is very easy. It's basically the Google of dark web. It's just a browser. So like kind of Google Chrome, Edge. Tor is a type of browser. So
the Onion Relay, I believe.
The onion relay. So it's like Sam said about the dark web and how it was created through an onion route, and it's called that because it's just different layers. So the Tor basically just means the onion relay or the onion route. So it's just the name of a browser like Firefox or something else. So it's become, it started off as being this relay, and then it's become a browser as a tool. So it's now just kind of a brand name for accessing the dark web.
Fantastic. We have got a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and speed through a few of them. Just very quickly, you talked about clicking links and the danger of clicking links. Sometimes my computer gives me a view option as opposed to opening a document. Is it safe to click the view option to open it first, or should I always consider sort of deleting it if I don't know who it's from?
That depends on the part that it is. So for instance, if you're going into preview, and it depends on the system you're using and how up to date the system is. So for instance, if you're using New Outlook on your computer and you're clicking on preview a PDF, that is just opening up a window to highlight it. But that entirely depends on how secure that is into your Microsoft settings that are set for your organization. So it depends on whether you've got like Microsoft Defender or other tools that are checking to see whether that's open. If in doubt, ask your IT team is the response. And when you are asking the IT team, please just use snipping tool, use a screenshot, or take a photo with your phone, take a photograph of what it is you've received and send that to the IT team, send the photograph. Don't forward the email, because if you forward the email and the IT team hasn't had enough coffee to wake up yet, they might click on it thinking that you're sending them the attachment. There have been a few people. IT people are not infallible, unfortunately. No. We're pretty close to perfect, but sometimes we need to be turned off and on again.
Cyber people aren't infallible. I did a phishing exercise back in a bank, and the person sat next to me, one of the analysts, fell for it, even though I was explaining that I was sending this out.
Yeah, I mean, I told the story in the first session, and at risk of ruining my own career, I've fallen for my own phishing attack before because I forgot that I set it up. So it's fairly easy to do. But if in doubt, don't click. So if you have any level of suspicion, it's worthwhile just checking with somebody else to make sure, because your IT team will be able to at least quarantine the machine or turn it on, like disconnect it from the internet to double check so that it can spread. So effectively, they can at least make sure.
On top of that, this is why sometimes it's important to make sure that you don't always use admin when you are logged on, and you have a sort of normal non-admin when you're logged onto a Windows computer in particular, because if you do accidentally try and download something, it at least blocks it from the everything, whereas if you admin, it gives it more permission if it's malicious to do stuff.
It's a really, really good point. So if people have looked at Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, it's something that's asked for in your organizations. But I would also recommend it on your personal devices. So you can't do it on a phone or a tablet, but on your personal laptop, same for your kids and other family members, make sure that they aren't logging in and have admin access. So when you set it up, and there's lots of YouTube videos on how to do it, but basically you want to have, particularly it's like a family computer, you want to have a kind of admin account that you log in to install applications and software, and then your local account. So I would log on as Curtis, but I might have an admin account separately. And it means that when I'm using the computer as Curtis and I'm logged in and just using it normally, if I do download something by mistake, the computer will then ask me for admin privileges before I can actually install it. So just asking for permission. It's kind of like putting parental controls on yourself.
Yeah.
And then just preventing it from putting
I'm
on.
going to try and speed you up a bit now because we've got a lot of questions.
That's fine.
What's the difference between social engineering and cybercrime? Isn't it the same? Hopefully that's a relatively quick one.
Social engineering is just part of cybercrime. So effectively, social engineering, we just mean specifically they're finding out information specifically to you to trick you into doing something. So
yeah,
the crime
it's just marketing, but against the law. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Next question. We use an external job board to advertise job vacancies, which means I'm often sent emails from people outside of my organisation with attachments I have to open. Is there a way to minimise the risk of this?
Yeah, a couple of things. So if I go first, then you tag on. So so first thing I would recommend is setting up a shared email account so that those emails aren't going directly to your personal email, but it's going to ones that it might be HR or recruitment at whatever your organization's name is. And that doesn't cost you anything. You can set it up as a shared mailbox through Microsoft or whatever, and then set it up so it's going to that area. That means that then you're going in and this stuff is likely to be sent from here. And it also just gives you a bit of a behavioral warning that it's not necessarily for you directly. And so it might also be more spam because that email address is then more public. The other thing is then to make sure you've got some kind of email gateway, which I know is a technical term, but basically something that is scanning your emails as they come in, and that will reduce your risk. So it's kind of like antivirus or endpoint protection on your computer, but this is for email as it comes in.
Yeah, agree. And the other thing I'd recommend with your anti-malware, antivirus, whether that's Defender, Norton, whoever you happen to use, I've forgotten the word now, Curtis. Behavioral, so it checks if anything's been changed as well as just signatures.
Yeah.
heuristic scanning. That's it.
Yeah.
Superb. Question here. It might sound like a stupid question. Absolutely, no, it does not. Can someone accidentally access the dark web? How would we know?
Sam, do you want to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you could. I suppose you can't do it by accident because you have to download Tor and then you have to load up Tor for it to open. But if you were just playing around, seeing what Tor was about, and you downloaded it and wanted to see it as a browser, you could accidentally go on the darknet. But unless you have a .onion address of something to go to, it's very unlikely that you'd find anything too dodgy.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely fine using the internet as you are normally. You're not gonna be on YouTube and suddenly end up looking at guns for sale. It is a deliberate action to go into it. The only exception would be if somebody would send you a link that was deliberately taking you to the dark web, but that would then be the kind of trick. But just your general browsing, no, it's very unlikely that you're going to end up on the dark web by mistake.
Brilliant. Another question that came in was that can an administrator keep passwords for each member of staff securely, lawfully? By this, I mean that staff will often use simple passwords or forget them altogether, whereas an admin could create a better, more effective password, although obviously this could compromise security internally. Great question.
Yeah, I think I understand the question. So the key answer here is no, no, but yes, because no, they're not actually storing your password. So your admin should not know your password. So for they shouldn't know exactly what it is at all. It should just be stored. So for instance, in Microsoft, when we're in the back end of it and we reset your password for you, we will only ever see a temporary password to share to you to say, use this and type this in the first time so that then you can change your password afterwards. However, admins should be able to set up a password policy that has a minimum requirement. So it can't use common words and it can't have less than 12 characters and it can't have or be lowercase, etc. So they can put in place a technical password policy that means you must create a strong password in the same way that when you're signing up to your banking, etc. and it says create a password and it does the whole thing where you've got it twice. It says these are the rules for creating it. Your admin in your IT team should be able to set that up in place for you. So there's a minimum requirement, but they can't see your passwords or make them on your behalf.
Password manager is the only thing I can recommend if you wanted to do something like that, because then you can set a corporate level, because that is about mainly Windows passwords. If you want to set passwords for everything, use a corporate password manager, because then you can set it. Now, the admin doesn't see your passwords the same, but you can automatically create one, and it's going to be safer than just making Mickey one. No offense, Curtis.
No, absolutely. No, you're quite right. So it's why I don't make passwords. So as humans, we're just rubbish at making passwords. So definitely use a password manager. The one that I would recommend, it's just my personal recommendation, is 1Password. To quote BBC, other password managers are available. Please just do some research beforehand and make sure they haven't been previously hacked. So, or there's not an affiliation with a country that shouldn't be. So if you use a password manager, it just means you can put all your passwords in there and it will create the password for you. It just makes it a lot easier. So that's a good recommendation. And they're fairly low cost and well worth having for both personal life and professional life, because it keeps everything unique and secure.
Fantastic. Another question here, that if you end up paying a ransom, what is there to stop them selling or passing all your information on to someone else?
Nothing.
Brilliant question. Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
You're right. They are criminals. So yeah, that's exactly what they're likely to do. So they're probably going to say, we'll help you to make sure we fix this. And then 6 months later, their friend is then.
There is a slightly more nuanced answer, which I probably shouldn't give here, but I will do from a law enforcement point of view and from a negotiation point of view. Different groups have different characteristics of how they will deal with things. There are some professional, such as nation states, who once you pay it, they don't get rid of the data, but they stick to their end of the bargain. But you can't guarantee that in any way. Most criminal gangs will just hold on to the data or do you later on for worse data.
Yeah, it's kind of like honor amongst thieves.
Yeah.
So you're still dealing with thieves and still dealing with criminals. So you've got no guarantee, but it depends on how difficult the recommendation. And of course, we're going to say this is don't be in that situation in the first place. So make sure all of your data is backed up and immutable. And immutable just means it can't be changed once it's backed up. And that way, then, if you do get a ransomware attack, you can restore from that data. But yeah, there is no guarantee that if you do pay the ransom, that you're not going to be targeted and attacked again.
And I think we'll cover what you do if you've been attacked in the third webinar. So let's not tread on that sort of territory too much at the moment. We'll definitely put that into the third webinar. You also mentioned AI, which will make security threats that much harder to detect. And another sort of question related to that one is that, are there any kind of reference areas where you can kind of see these threats in real time to try and sort of get in front of them, to at least know what you're looking out for?
You can. The difficulty with that is that a lot of the tools are quite expensive. So there's an entire field of cybersecurity called threat intelligence, which is exactly what you're talking about. So it's effectively us using tools that we have. So the map I showed earlier of the leaks and then the targeted attackers, that's the tool that we use, which is threat intelligence, looking at things that are on the dark web. So you can sign up to different newsletters and alerts, etc., to try and highlight it. The difficulty is it's probably somebody who's within cyber who's going to need to be able to stay on top of these things to understand whether it's going to affect your organization or not. But it's a whole field of areas called threat intelligence for exactly that, trying to stay ahead of the game.
You can get a little bit if you happen to have an NHS email address. They have a CSOC, and they've got a little bit of threat intelligence they can share with you, but that's quite limited to your links with NHS or local authorities.
Other areas of places like the NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Centre for the UK, they've got lots of free resources. And another fantastic resource for you, if you are concerned, is your local CRC. So there are now CRCs, which is Cyber Response Centre, Sam? It's part of the police now.
Resilience Centres.
Cyber Resilience Centres, thanks. And they also help small organisations and care sector. They're part of the police arm underneath it, but they're now they're set up all across the UK. So and it's done by the different regions of the UK. So you can look for the CRC in your area, and they will give some advice on other areas, and you can come to us and we can also give advice on kind of small things. Other key part is then looking at webinars that are talking about things like this, where we look at doing trends for the year, and we maybe look at say, right, these are the threats that we recommend are coming up. And then key part is just making sure you're passing that on to all of your staff. So you might train your IT team and your board of directors in one area to keep them ahead of the threats that are going to affect them. But then you also need to do the general awareness across the whole of your organization to make sure that they're not going to fall for Google versus Google or Apple versus Apple, and they're aware of the kind of small kind of things that they need to do, because it is a strong area of defense for your staff being trained.
Just on a zoomed out scale, if you follow a framework like DSPT or Cyber Essentials as well, generally speaking, they update every year based on threat intelligence, what's happening, the biggest things that are happening. It's not perfect, but if you can't zoom down into detail, if you follow a framework like that and keep updated every year, they will take into account things like multi-factor authentication or different attacks that are happening.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Put into the chat a link to the some CRC webinars where you can access all of those free resources as well. Now, this is either someone very, very clever trying to hack us all here, or it is someone asking a genuine question, but they've put a link to Password Monster and something that this person's told their staff to use, and they would just like your views on it. If you don't think it's safe, you're not going to use it. Now, I don't want to click the link.
I don't want to click on a link while I'm here.
No, it's all right. I'll check it separately. So it is a password manager. Without checking it properly, I would need to look in, but it's not. I would never use anything without doing your vendor kind of assessment checks. So that's an entire series of webinars to look at. But very quickly, I would just go through and highlight that you need to look at, when you're doing vendor assessment, you should be looking at their security, particularly if it's an IT software or any kind of digital vendor. You should be looking at what their backgrounds are. So before looking at a password manager, do things like top 10 password managers of 2026 and look at what the reviews are. Don't just go from one website like Gartner or TechRadar or anything and take their word for it. Spend a bit of time doing the research to work out why are people saying about it, and try to look for independent reviews and look for information. You can always come to the CCOE or Digital Care Hub and other areas to say, look for it. So part of what I do within CCOE as a VCSO is test things on behalf of the sector and organisation. So if you are interested in any kind of tooling, you can come to us and we'll basically kind of act as the which best buy, if you like, to help you with it. So that's not a problem. So I haven't looked at Password Monster previously, but I've done this last year. The one that came out on top when I looked at 12 different ones was 1Password. Again, I'm not affiliated with them. I'm just a fanboy of them. That's it.
Brilliant. We are moving into the second half of the section now for people who can stay, so we'll just continue on with questions. But please, if people do want to put their hands up and ask a question, please do so. And Elia, if you just prompt me if I miss any hands that have gone up, because I'm looking at questions at the moment. Next question is, we use electronic care plans. Is there any risk in sharing the link to access this care plan with residents, relatives, families, professionals, etc., who need to access particular residents' care plans? It's a really good question. That's part of our day-to-day.
So that's always the difficulty, is the version. If cyber had our way, we would just have no internet and no communications whatsoever, and all businesses would go back to using carrier pigeon. And even then, you would still need to make sure those carrier pigeons weren't trying to create some kind of fraud or be the wrong pigeon. So unfortunately, it's just a part of business of working out how you can show your teams internally this is the way the format is going to be, and this is the way it's going to come from, and then just training them to look for what's going to be regular. My key recommendation is for anything that's going to be kind of commonly accessed, use like an intranet, like SharePoint or something that you can put commonly accessed links up to, and make it clear that if you go here, the links here we know are safe because we've put them all together for you. So here's an area of shortcuts basically that you can go into access.
Fantastic. Are there any references to these threats in real time? Also, how do you handle care providers without a traditional infrastructure or have not embraced technology? Again, great question.
Do you want to start with that, Sam, and I'll follow up?
Yeah. Where do you go for? I think we've said that sort of CRCs, NCSC. You can just look for cyber updates like the register and stuff like that, and they'll send you a daily update of the stories of the day. When it comes to smaller providers or providers who haven't gone full tech yet, there's still things that you can do. If you are still on written records and things like that, you still need to think about your personal privacy, your data security when it comes to like anything that's online. You don't have to be online to be attacked when it comes to cybersecurity. It could be you personally are attacked. For example, if you're on social media, and then I can come in pretending that I'm from the CQC and get in that way. So for me, it's using a framework, using people like Curtis and myself to just make sure that you improve a little bit. Make sure you've got your basics right. It doesn't take much to become a much more difficult target. Password managers, good configuration, good IT supplier that you've done some due diligence on, vendor checking and stuff like that. These small steps can make a huge difference and stop you being an easy target.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. We also have some specific things that we've worked with Care England on developing. So we do have Care Protect packages, which are designed for small organisations, and we've looked at tools that are specifically low cost but high impact, so that you can get military grade protection at kind of high street pricing. And that's designed for exactly this problem, because not everybody has the ability to be able to afford outsourced IT. And those that do have outsourced IT might not realise that IT and cyber are two separate disciplines. They live in the same area and together. But Sam and I are not IT specialists, we're cyber specialists. So we work with IT teams to support it. But you should always kind of have, in the same way that if you're preparing a piece of work of anything, you would usually send it to somebody else as a second pair of eyes that's going to look through as a copy editor or whatever it is to check that that's the correct thing. Same thing with IT and cyber. You might have your IT being done by one group, but your cyber or your cyber assessment, it could be you internally or somebody external, checking to make sure that that's still in line with what we're kind of expecting. So there are lots of things that you can do for free as well, as Sam said. So things like making sure your admin account is separate from your usual day-to-day account, making sure you've got multi-factor authentication turned on, making sure you're using strong passwords. These things make a significant difference to just reducing how visible you are on the internet and how likely you are to then fall for an attack afterwards. So yeah, there are lots
keep everything updated as well. Don't rely on Windows. This is a little thing, but don't rely on Windows updating all your software. Windows will keep Windows updated, but you need to make sure that your Adobe and everything else is as well.
Yeah, and that also goes for your phones and tablets to make sure they're kept up to date.
There's a couple of questions that come in very similar to one we already says. Are there any latest trends or threats? Is there a place that we can kind of be kept up to date on them? That's one question that kind of comes through. And is there a newsletter? Is there something that people can sign up to understand what the latest threats are? And if so, where can they access those newsletters?
There are a few different ones. The difficulty is lots of them are created for different sectors and different areas. There's lots of information that goes out from Care England and Digital Care Hub, and from CCOE, from ourselves. We're obviously very much cyber focused, but we have things like the Transform magazine and now the Catalyst magazine that go out for different areas for things that we've worked on. But there are lots of places you can go to for cyber news and areas. So it's kind of identifying the parts that are most relevant to you. We could consider between the three organisations that are hosting this whether we send something out. The key part that I would look for are webinars and upcoming events, because you have the opportunity to be able to delve in a little bit deeper to understand, well, what does that actually mean for me? Because you can ask questions like this, etc., and follow in. There are lots of companies like Tech Trends, and you can go onto BBC News and look for specifically cyber and other areas. The difficulty is translating. Well, sometimes it just tells you about companies that have been hacked. It doesn't tell you about the methods that you need to do to be able to prevent that from happening. That kind of comes from just keeping on top of different technologies and areas.
I think that's something maybe we'll take away ourselves as Digital Care Hub, CCOE, and Care England, try and see if we can put together something that maybe is a bit of a newsletter to try and just get out there to people, just to kind of let them know what the latest things are. Just a nice quick one page every so often to help people understand and point them to some resources. We'll take that offline. Are there any tools we can use to help educate staff? I know you talked about the CRCs, where there's a lot of free resources there, but other than the CRC, is there any other kind of tools and support? I know you've talked about some of the CCOE offerings as well.
We have, this is where I can plug ourselves now. Digital Care Hub has free e-learning. So you can do things like that for training staff, and it works for staff and it works for data leads as well. They'll take you through some simple training. But as Curtis has said, NCSC is pretty good. The CRCs are good. My mind's gone blank. Care England, CCOE, all of us will have something that can help you. But in particular, we do have e-learning that can help with your staff training.
Yeah, absolutely. And that one kind of depends on the size of your organization as well. So if you're a small team, then I would say use those free resources and definitely make sure that you're kind of tying in and keeping up to date. And you can, the YouTube videos go a long way because most of it is just understanding. If you need something where you're kind of looking more for making sure you've got compliance, then you might need to have something where you're able to demonstrate, right, well, this member of staff has done this training and then signed up. So if that's the case, then we offer NCSC assured e-learning advice as well, and we can point you in the right direction, and Richard and the team at Care England can point you in either way. But there are lots of resources there. It depends on the size of your organisation and what kind of is going to fit best for you. There's lots of things available.
Now, you turned into a Dalek there for me, Chad. That might be my internet rather than yours.
No, for me as well. I thought you might.
That's okay.
Could you just mute yourself for a second, Curtis? Yeah. Okay, I think it might be your internet, Curtis. Might just be how about that? Yeah.
I'll turn off my video and see if that makes it any better.
Brilliant. The next question, straight to you on this. I've got the Dalek. How do you feel about simulations? How important is it that staff use Outlook's button to kind of report phishing instances?
I'll go for that while Curtis is fixing. So how important is it to use the Outlook phishing button? Very important in my opinion. I mean, it depends how it's been set up. The general setup is it'll go to Microsoft, but you can set it up to do all sorts of things. But it's really important that you report all these phishing emails rather than just delete them, because you don't know what part of the jigsaw you might have had. You might have a phishing email from a criminal group and they forgot to turn their VPN on or something. And NCSC, GCHQ, or Microsoft can collate all those emails that are reported to them to start shutting down these groups, tracing them and stopping them. So the more you report, the less you get, because sometimes it feels like you report and nothing happens. I promise you in the background things are happening when you do that. The other thing it does is that it'll send it as an attachment rather than forwarding it, which is quite important when you're analyzing an email. From a cyber analyst point of view, when you're analyzing the email, having it as an attachment because it has everything connected to it, rather than it being forward where you just have your stuff on it. It's slightly technical, but hopefully that gets the point across. But yes, please use the button when you can.
Brilliant. Another good one here. I've still got the Dalek sounds. I apologize. Hopefully you can hear me okay. How do you feel about phishing simulations? How useful are they? And does it really help with staff report phishing through? Oh, we've covered the Outlook point, but yeah, what generally about phishing simulations? What are your thoughts about those?
I think if my voice sounding okay now?
No, sorry, Curtis, you still
for me. It's all right, you carry on, but yeah, my vote is yes, use phishing simulations.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with Curtis. Use phishing simulations. Do it as often as you can, because the more you start to realize what to look out for, the better you get. I'd absolutely do it. Just be careful of who you use, because you don't want to get stuck where some people, where they use really old technology and old ideas of phishing, which means that you miss actual phishing things. So as Curtis mentioned earlier, we used to say, like, you can tell because it's got bad spelling, bad this, that, and the other. If you've got a piece of software that's sending you phishing emails, and it's using those old techniques, you want one that can be a bit more. I don't know if I can promote this or not, but Google Jigsaw does a free one. It's just a quick, is this phishing? Is it not? It's just a quick click through, but that's quite good because it's a little bit more technical than some of the older ones where it's like, dear customer, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, and it'll keep people thinking about it. But you want one that moves with the times a little bit as well.
Brilliant. And just while we're on the phishing, is would the admin be able to set up where the phishing emails are reported to within an organisation?
Yeah, you can set it up.
Fantastic. Next one, quite a long question. How do providers protect themselves? So CQC are really pushing, and as is the Department of Health and Social Care, use of digital platforms, the digital care records, where everything about the individual is kind of stored and uploaded into the systems. It kind of helps to ensure documents are kept up to date quickly and shared with everyone in a timely manner. Absolutely. There's a lot of information uploaded. But as care providers, we're trusting those organisations, and that's the PCSs, the NARIs, the Log My Care of this world, that those companies who run those organisations are really protecting themselves from cyber attack. How confident are we that they are doing what they're doing?
I mean, yeah, it's a great question, and that's one of the things that you have to keep an eye on when you do your vendor checks, whether it's PCS or something like that. So a lot of them might be assured suppliers, but you need to do your own due diligence on them. It's sad that Curtis has suddenly turned into a robot because he's probably got a lot of information on vendor checks and things like that.
Try again, and if not, I'll type out an answer. So is this any better?
Not at all.
No, sorry.
I'll just stick
You type out the answer. Yeah. But yeah, so it's do your own vendor controls with stuff like that. Check if they've got. I mean, when you do your DSPT, for example, it will go through the things that you can check a company against. Exactly. Interoperability versus security. This is something that Curtis and I will constantly battle with because we're from the cyber side. We're going to say no to a lot of things. Whereas, as rightly people point out, you have to work and you have to work well, which is pieces of software, interoperability and stuff like that. You can trust them with a pinch of salt if they've got all the stuff set up right, if they've got background checks, if they've got proper encryption set up and things like that. I don't, as Curtis might have put it in there. Yeah, he might answer it in chat. There could be a questionnaire, for example, that you could send to potential things to answer. You don't want to listen to just the marketing hype because they're going to tell you what you want to hear. You want to hear how they've secured things, what encryption they use, how they're horizon scanning for any attacks that they go against. How do their staff deal with social engineering? Do they go through their own training? Have they had any near misses, and how have they coped with that near miss? How have they improved their own standard based on their own pen tests and stuff like that?
Fantastic. I can see we've come to sort of the end of the questions almost. Just if anyone has got any other questions they'd like to put to the panel, please do drop those into the chat now, or feel free to raise your hand. I can't see any hands that have been raised so far. You talked about the dark web being more than a place than to just sort of buy guns and what have you. But what are the sort of, if you said the top sort of 2 or 3 risks for social care providers in regards to kind of like the dark web, what would they be, Sam, do you think?
Data breaches. You've got a lot of personal data, and if somebody uploads it to the dark web and starts sharing it, that's a huge risk, especially when it comes to ransomware. I've forgotten the terminology, but they can shut your systems down, tell you that they've got your data, and then they can ransom for you to turn your systems back on, as well as getting the data back or deleted. I think for me, I mean, this is different for Eve. I've come from a hacking background, basically red team it's called, where I pretend to be the hacker. For me, it's the forums that are the most difficult, I think, because that's where ideas are shared amongst hackers. So if they've broken into PCS, for example, they haven't been broken into as far as I know, but let's say that vulnerability is being found in a piece of software that a lot of people use, and they share that on the darknet. That's where all the other criminals will pick up on that and build on it into something that, well, I mean, you could see when the court went down, Jaguar Land Rover and stuff like that. That's where things can spread so easily, that kind of knowledge.
Brilliant. And Michaela's just asked if we could just clarify repeat the protection there is against malicious attachments. If there is no opinion of setting up a separate mailbox, no option of setting up a separate mailbox. Could you maybe just recover that one, the malicious email side of things?
If there's no option of setting up a separate mailbox, well, it's just a case of making sure that you've got really good antivirus. Now, that could be just Defender, or you could have a full suite get in. And what I'd recommend is if you've got an option of heuristic scanning. So what that means is that it doesn't just check if something is a virus when it's emailed to you. It checks if it does anything that it shouldn't be doing behavior-wise in the background. Make sure that you're not on an admin account when you are looking at these emails. So if anything ever does jump out, it just affects that particular one and not an admin account where it can start to affect others. I think that's probably, I don't know if Curtis, you want to start writing something. I feel bad now. Curtis is going to be typing like mad.
And
There he is.
There you go. And I think Nadia's also put another point there around, obviously, some of the digital care record providers that we're talking around are on the NHS assured solutions list. So you would hope there is some assurance they've done the due diligence themselves. But of course, there are lots of other technologies outside of just the DCR platforms around, acoustic monitoring, listening devices, cameras, other forms of software, payroll software that isn't on an NHS list. So that's the due diligence that kind of yourself and Kurt have talked around that needs to be done. And if you're not sure, then speak to partners like Digital Care Hub, like CCOE, to try and get that advice. And the CRC advice is phenomenal. So there's a lot of free tools there. Please, try and tap into those. Now, I can see, I think Jamie has also put in there, who just wanted to ask his question around local storage for a database. We have answered that question. I'm just trying to find the question again. I've answered it, so it's gone off my register. Jamie, do you want to maybe come off mute and ask your question? I don't know if you can do that or not. Ellie, does Jamie have the ability to do that?
No, Richard, it all has to be done through the Q&A, I believe.
Okay, I can't find the question on database because I've answered it. So if you can help me.
No, it's going to work. I've just answered it in the chat, so there's it's better to so local servers, etc. used to be used, but it's I'll answer in the chat.
Brilliant. Curtis will answer that one in the chat for you. Wonderful. Question about local storage. Cloud is often better, but needs to be configured correctly. That's from Curtis. Thank you very much.
Yes, but from a purely security point of view, if you have your database on your own server locked away safely and not connected to the internet, it's air-gapped, we call it, that would technically be safer, but would that be usable? That's where you've got to balance things like that.
Yeah, and Sam, this is a really good one as well that's come into the Q&A. A lot of care providers want to use the free tools and resources that are out there. Would you kind of advise more towards kind of the paid tools being better?
Rule of thumb, yes, just because it depends where you get the free tools from. If you're getting the free tools from an organization, it's really difficult to say this without sounding awful. Sometimes they are free because you are the product and they are selling you or your data or something like that. Sometimes they are free, for example, through us because we get a grant from the government to help you out. So those kind of free things are good. Then you get companies such as Curtis's, which offer some fantastic free advice with the idea that you might be able to upgrade or spend something to get even better stuff. So it's really difficult to tell what's good and what's not. But as a rule of thumb, if you pay for something, it's usually better than free when it comes to technology, but not always.
Brilliant. And I think there's another, Curtis just put in the chat around local services. Local servers can be made secure, but must be kept up to date. And from my perspective, I was in a previous role. We had a database that was used off-site. We had some sensitive data in it, and it was hacked by Russians. They didn't get the data, but they were able to hack it. So you can have offline data in a very secure environment. If you leave a door open or if you leave a gap somewhere, it's very easy for people to get in, and it's very easy to kind of leave doors open.
It is. As Curtis rightly points out, if you do that, it's not a case of just having a server and doing it. You need full security architecture set up for that. And you need constant monitoring and all sorts of things. It's not just a case of having it like locked in an office somewhere.
Yeah, just because it's locked in under your desk, it doesn't mean it's safe.
No.
That has brought us to the end of the questions. I'm sorry for some of the technical gremlins that we've had, but that is the world of, there's probably some hackers out there trying to disturb everything that we're saying.
It's because I changed my background. I feel I jinxed it.
Well, look, thank you very, very much for everyone for your time today. It's been incredibly helpful. We'll send a copy of the recording. We'll send links where you can register for the dark web scan. We really encourage you to do that. There's 50 providers can get that for free, and Curtis will send you your reports and we'll be able to go through it on the next webinar. Obviously not breaching any confidence, but just some sort of high-level findings of what we found. We'll send you links to the webinar 1 recording. You'll get web links to this recording and the slides, and you'll also be sent links on where you can register for the next webinar in a couple of weeks' time. But just huge thanks to everybody for joining. You will have the contact details of both Sam and Curtis shared after the event as well. If you've got questions, go to them directly. They're there, they're willing, they're happy, and they're able to answer your questions. And if you're not sure what to do on something, don't just guess, don't just assume. Reach out to one of these professionals. There's some great support out there. The CRC is a free resource as well. Ask questions, be inquisitive, don't make assumptions. This is moving at a pace faster than any of us can really keep up with on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, as Curtis pointed out on that Microsoft email that he got, it's very easy to miss the obvious. And these are people who are working in this space day to day. So, yeah, please use us as resources. And thank you so much for your time and for joining the session today. Thank you.